So let's get into it. So I'm going to be sharing my work on using wearable devices to reduce severe behaviors in school settings in students with and without profound autism. So the work that I'll be sharing with you today is very much inspired by my little brother who's on the spectrum and my two brothers-in-law who have profound autism. So about 70% of school-age children on the spectrum have these severe behaviors. Challenging behaviors, we know, have a devastating impact on families, on parental quality of life. They predict teacher burnout. They are the most frequent cause of hospitalizations. And importantly, they're harder to treat in individuals with profound versus non-profound autism. So why is this the case? Well, I think there's two main reasons. They're often underlooked. So, we know that individuals on the spectrum have more triggers than other individuals throughout their day. Some people say, what happened? They went from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds flat. But what I think is happening is that stress is really flying under the hood, and then we're not capturing it in the same way because they're not able to communicate their stress like others. So technology can help. What we've been working on is to identify wearable devices that could be helpful for measuring stress. We know that heart rate is not a perfect correlate of stress, but it is associated with it. So we look to see which wearable devices are out there in the market that are comfortable, valid, and reliable, and we found a couple that we have been working with, a chest strap and a wristband that you can see here. And we found that 85% of kids who are wearing this, kids with autism, were able to keep these on for a couple of hours at least. So that was encouraging research showing that we can pull this forward. 3 of my studies found also that heart rate increase predicted the onset of challenging behavior episodes in kids with autism, preschoolers, and school-aged children. And importantly, we're not only seeing that in the lab setting, we're seeing that in school settings as well. So really, we can take this technology to where it matters most. Okay, so I'm going to talk through what the conceptual design of the application that we made is all about. Keep Calm is the name that we've chosen based on some feedback from teachers who are on our expert advisory board. The idea here is that children wear one of these devices that connects with the application that we've developed. Teachers can see the best strategies to work with for the child, when and how to intervene based on heart rate increase of a baseline of heart rate recording. And importantly, teams can share that information. So it's not just that the teachers and educators at the school setting are learning those great strategies, but parents at home are able to use those strategies as well. And we've linked that with infographics and videos about the strategies so they can learn how to use them at home. This is what happens here. So let's say Jose or Luke are wearing one of these devices, plus an accelerometer. We know that we want to measure movement because that's an important indicator of when heart rate is going up and down. The child could be just running around and their heart rate is going up. And we don't want to necessarily capture that, right? So we need to know when they're moving. That connects with our app Keep Calm, and then the teacher is able to see in the moment which strategies to use, and that is based on data that was into the app based on, basically the app is getting smarter with more use. They're able to understand the pattern of physiological stress reduction, the heart rate going down, which is going to say, maybe this strategy works better than others. We're also having them enter behavior skill and strategy data, and also rating from their own perspective whether the strategy worked or not. So the app, with all that information, can send out what we call a top strategy notification when the child has gone from the green zone into the orange or red zone, so when their heart rate is elevated. And this is individualized per child. This is what the app actually looks like that we've been testing in a clinical trial. I'm going to show some initial results from that today. Just to note, the infographics and videos that we made about the evidence-based strategies that were pulled from a systematic review that we did in this area are available free of charge on our website that is up here. I've got a QR code on the last slide as well. So here are some of the pictures of the app. So the first couple of slides are showing you when heart rate is recorded in the school. The third one is an example of one of those pop-up notifications that the teacher would see, showing the child is in an elevated heart rate zone, and also which strategies to use in the moment. The fourth one here is an example of a day summary that the parent can see, which is a summary of what has happened that day, also which strategies are working best, like their top list, and then they can click on that to be brought to the resources that are in the app so they can learn how to use those strategies at home. Those are all in the app there, and then we've also got some app help and other things there too. So we've just ran, and we're just at the tail end of our first randomized control trial looking at this application in the school setting. We're partnering with schools around Philadelphia and preschools around Philadelphia. We're going to be ending out that trial at the end of this school year in June. So we wanted to know some basic questions. We wanted to know, are teachers and parents using the app? Does this really help with in-the-moment decisions about what to do with children? Do they like it? Do they think it's a good fit? Do they think it's feasible to do this kind of intervention in the school setting? Teachers and parents fill out surveys to measure outcomes, baseline, mid-trial, and post-trial. I definitely need to talk with Bob with some more kind of objective measures. You'll see that in the results. Okay, so onto the consult diagram showing who we have in the study. So we have screened a lot of people, 177 people, of which most of those who did not go on to be actually a part of the trial were not paired with a teacher or a parent, so we got one but not the other. We need both to continue in the trial. 51 pairs of educators and parents were randomized. It's including 21 teachers and 30 parents. The interim analysis that I'll be sharing with you today we have 10 teams in the Keep Calm group. We have 11 teams in the waitlist control. We did have a couple that had dropped out, but because a couple of children that had dropped out, but because the teachers had other students who were interested in being a part of the study, we didn't lose the teachers from the trial. Should note that in terms of adverse events, we were rigorously looking at that, and a couple of the children who had dropped out of the trial was because of the wearing the devices. So we know that not all the kids are going to be able to keep those devices on, so that's important to keep in mind. But we did see with other kids that they enjoyed wearing the devices. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all the details here, but just to let you know that we did recruit a diverse sample with a range of ages and IQ levels. As I mentioned, one of our objectives in this study was to include kids with profound autism. And we met our criteria. We have 50% of kids with profound autism in the sample. And so we looked at this in a couple of different ways. We looked at IQ, so kids who are lower than 50 in terms of their IQ, or that teacher, based on teacher or parent report, they had less than 20 words functionally that they used. So the 50% is sort of incorporating all of those, and you can see the breakdown in terms of the different measures. There's a lot of debate actively about what to use in terms of keeping kids, characterizing kids with profound autism, and I know the work from Matthew Siegel that was mentioned at INSAR last year had talked about adaptive behavior being very important. So moving forward, we'll include those measures too. Okay, so our first question, did teachers use the app? Well, we did see that they were using it about 17 days out of their 60-day trial. So it was 3 months, but that boils down to 60 days, school days. And so they're using it about 28% of the time, less than we'd hoped for, but hey, at least they're using it. They'd entered more behaviors and triggers than skills and strategies, so that's important when we're thinking about our top strategy algorithm. They did not often go into the app to rate strategy effectiveness. We found that. But overall, they were using it around a quarter of the days in the trial. Now, was Keep Calm helpful for teachers in the moment intervention decisions? And what we found here I think is quite interesting. We found that around 6% of the pop-up notifications that were shown to teachers during the trial actually resulted in them using that specific strategy that was suggested to them. So, we're not very encouraged by that. But when we looked to see, whether they were just seeing the pop-up notification and really implementing any strategy. So maybe, they're busy teaching, they see a pop-up notification. They may not be able to be right there to see all the detail, to know which strategy specifically to intervene with. But maybe they just see it as a pop-up notification. They're also getting, for those who were their phone was linked to their they're watched, they're also getting a vibrate, so it just tells them, hey, something's going on with this child, let's go see what's going on and we can intervene. And so when we considered any strategy that was implemented after a pop-up notification, around a third of those resulted in them actually doing the strategy or implementing the strategy. And that was encouraging, and informative for us to understand how, they were using this information in the moment. In terms of app feedback, what we can see, we looked at lots of different ways in which we were looking at this data. And so we were looking at acceptability, do they like it? We were looking at appropriateness, do they think it's appropriate to the context? And was it feasible? And so the feasibility scores were a little bit less. We did find throughout the study that really we need to involve more aides in the study because teachers being control of so much in the classroom, they're not really going to be as available to take data and to be with the phone. So that was a big learning from the trial. We also found that, teachers and parents generally liked the app. Teachers thought that it had utility in understanding new patterns of behaviors, so uncovering triggers that they may not have realized for a particular child. They also found the strategy, information about the strategies helpful. Parents said that it helped with school and home communication as well, so the sharing of data was important. Okay, so now onto the child outcome measures. Again, we're not powered to look at difference. There's a small number of kids in our trial at the moment. But what we did see is that overall, our outcome measures were sensitive to change, and we did seem to pick outcome measures that made sense. For our outcome measures, we looked at severity of challenging behavior, frequency of challenging behavior, and emotion dysregulation inventory, which looks at emotion dysregulation, which we're really seeing as more of sort of a mediating factor. So if kids are having less dysregulation, maybe they're going to have less challenging behavior. And so overall, our control group did really well. So our placebo, we saw a bit of a placebo effect here. And we were thinking, why could that be the case? Where in our treatment group, kids, the teachers and parents are really, by nature of the intervention, keyed into what was happening with the behaviors in much more of a systematic way than a control group who were on the waitlist control. So that's important for us designing the next trial. Definitely need to have more objective outcome measures there and potentially an active control rather than a waitlist control. Okay, so on to our results showing, breaking down kids who have profound autism versus non-profound, and I'm sorry, my labels are not there, but in the top row here you can see this is the profound kids, and on the bottom there, sorry, moving back a step, I have those in the next slide. So on this slide here, we're seeing that there's really, overall, for a bigger group, there's not as much change for the entire group. But when we start to look at the groups broken down by profound versus non-profound, I think we're starting to see some interesting things. So the EDI, the Emotion Dysregulation Inventory, has two subscales, the reactivity and dysphoria subscales. This one here is looking at rapidly escalating, intense, poorly regulated negative affect characterized by anger or irritability. So, a key target of our intervention. And we can see that for the non-profound group on the bottom there is not as much change, but there seems to be something going on with the Keep Calm group for the profound kids in that over time their symptoms of emotion dysregulation are going down. We want this to go down over time. So that was important for us and very encouraging. And we're seeing a pretty similar kind of a pattern of results here for dysphoria too. So dysphoria meaning sadness, unease, low motivation, anhedonia. And we're seeing for the profound group on the top row that we are, at least by teacher report, there's more instances of change overall as a group, which we're not seeing as much for the profound group. As I said, this is very early days and we still have much more to learn about this. We're continuing, the trial is ongoing and continuing to collect data. So, and then we want to be doing a next trial. So a lot of this information that we've gathered in this pilot trial is helping us to understand what we want to update in the app and what we want to do next for the next bigger trial. So in terms of app updates, we definitely want to be engaging with the one-to-one aides that work in classrooms, because we know that that's going to be a really good fit for them and not as much for the teachers. I didn't mention before, but teachers are more likely to engage with the app than parents. Parents are more likely to view the reports that we send out via email rather than going into the app itself. So So that's important learning for us too. In terms of the technical stability, some of the feasibility scores that were lower was to do with that kind of back-end infrastructure, which we did have some growing pains on, so we need to work on that a bit. And then, importantly, the pop-up notifications, we also learned that they're really using it more as a stress alarm rather than in the moment what to do. Maybe if we're engaging more aides, that might be different because they're more available to be looking at the app in the moment. But that's important information going forward. And then for the trial, the next trial, which will look more definitively at the impact on challenging behaviors and emotion dysregulation, we definitely need to include more objective measures, as I mentioned. We'll need to think about that in terms of the trial design, having an active control. We need to really figure out, kid by kid, family by family, teacher by teacher, what is going on with the devices, because we want to catch any instances where they are not feeling comfortable with the devices and help them to feel more comfortable. So through our expert advisory board, we created an I Can Wear Gadgets kind of protocol, what to do in those circumstances, which include having the teacher work with the child to desensitize them to wearing the devices. So, 10 minutes one day, 15 minutes the next day, that kind of thing. And also putting like stickers and things, making it more appealing to the child to wear. We have also found some encouraging results showing that potentially this is going to be more impactful for kids who have profound autism. So moving forward, we'll definitely want to be including that. And, that was very encouraging for me, given, where I'm coming from with my brothers. I think it's really important to engage this kind of technology because it could have real value in providing a voice where they don't have one. Okay, I want to thank so many people that are on my team, especially Rima Kamel, who pretty much coordinated this trial all by herself. The QR code there is for infographics and strategies. Huge thank you to David Mandel, who's my main mentor on this project, a mobile developer, and all the mentors and everybody else who helped out with this work. Thank you very much. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Thanks so much for your research. I have two questions. One is, although I understand for trial and for control purposes, you're starting this in schools. It would seem to me that perhaps this could be used for adults with severe autism, and either staff or BCBAs in either adult day programs, and or group homes.
Yeah, this is just really a starting place for us.
Yeah.
So we could imagine that it could be used in lots of different contexts with different aged kids, with kids who are, at homes or in clinics or, in many different locations too. So
that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think what we've learned is really it needs to be somebody who's working directly, some sort of one-to-one capacity where possible. But yeah, as you said, it could be in lots of different contexts.
And my second question was just when you were talking about recording the movement, that the movement is also, often a precursor or an indicator that there's going to be some kind of challenging behaviors shortly thereafter. What about just rocking, for example, that autistic people or adults say, in my personal experience, are using for, comfort or self-soothing? How do you differentiate between whether it's jumping around, is there a verbal component, like screaming, or how do you deal with the rocking or the repetitive movements?
Yeah, that's a really important point. And the reason why I used to do in my earlier work lots of different types of physiological markers, including skin conductance response and some other work in pupillometry. And we chose heart rate for the reason that because of these devices also being in the sort of fitness market, people use them because they want to measure heart rate when in active states. So we know that in terms of the data quality part, we're not going to have as much interference. People can move around their torso. We measure the movement based on torso movement. So as long as they're not doing very vigorous movement, and we put a cap, I think we said 1 meter per second or something like that, then we would if it's less movement than that, we're confident it's not going to affect the data. If it's more movement than that, what we decided to do in a way to handle that is to put the app in basically an offline mode, which gets shown to the teacher in the moment. And then once the movement has gone down, then we can, start pushing out the pop-up alerts again. But that has the potential issue of like we're maybe potentially missing challenging behaviors that are also associated with vigorous movement. So there's the potential issue there. I mean, you can still see within the application the heart rate rising and falling regardless of whether they've gone into this offline mode. We just didn't think it would be right to be sending out pop-up notifications if the kid is just legitimately running around and it's really not to do with their stress. So the technology is not perfect, but I think it's some way to at least check in with a potential time in which the child might be experiencing stress or some intense emotion. Yeah, sure.
Hi, Eric from the Coalition for Learning Science. Just to clarify, they get the wearable devices when they're in school.
That's right, yeah.
And you noted that parents did not engage with the app because the kids were at school.
The idea for the parents is that they were sort of the receiver of the reports at the end of the day, but not the real-time stress alerts or anything like that. We learned early on they didn't want that.
No, and I totally agree. And I think what I wanted to share is that like so many times in all of our interviews, we often hear that I as a parent know my child best, right? And so I wonder if you were to apply this at home, I wonder if parents would be able to actually predict some of the triggers that your app is saying. Heart rate could be one, right? But if the parent knows, I wonder if they could like notify the app that it's about to happen. And at the same time, you noted that the teachers may or may not take up the suggestion, right? Then I wonder, right, because the parent knows their child best, right? I wonder if you could refine the app at home and then further fine-tune it so that the suggestions could be even more tailored to the participant, because you've generated a fantastic link between the parent, the teacher, and the affected individual.
Oh, I love this idea. Yeah,
you're absolutely like on it. So I just wonder how can you turn that into a virtuous loop that is constantly feeding and like teaching itself.
Oh,
like
I love
kind of the
that.
forward-back translation.
I love that, and I think it really speaks to that point of trying to build that communication between home and school, and with which strategies that are working best. And as you rightly pointed out, parents know their child best, and if they can put that data in there, that can sync up with the data at school. That's just another way for the app to get smarter, to know what to do. So, I love that suggestion. Thank you.
As a shameless plug for the Simons Foundation, they just completed this amazing Simons sleep study, right? So you can imagine, do the individuals who are more prone to like challenging behaviors, are they that predictive community that has ADHD plus ASD and has prolonged sleep onset?
Yeah.
Right? So that would just be like a biomarker right there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly having that information in there too, I think would be really great, like sleep and any ADHD symptoms. I think the more information, the more data points, the better. They're going to learn more about what to do with the kids. Yeah, for sure. All right, thank you.
Right over here.
Doctor, just a quick question. When you're looking at the application as a trigger, a warning, an alarm, a stress alarm you mentioned in your paper, is it false positives, false negatives, or both that are the biggest issue?
Yeah, so we looked at that, and I took it out of my slides because there's just so much data already to present in 12 minutes. But we are seeing the teachers, because of them being in the school context, and also because of behaviors not being a perfect correlate of heart rate. It could never be. Heart rate can go up for many different reasons, and stress is one of them. That's a really important point to look at that. We don't want to ping them too much, because that's going to be annoying for the teacher to have a lot of alerts during the day. What we did is early on we looked to see how often it was being triggered, and we put limits on how frequently a pop-up notification would be sent out, so that if they went into the orange zone and then they went out, and then they went back in 10 seconds, they're not going to have multiple alerts. But that was something that we were very detailed in looking at. There is a difficulty of trying to figure out what's the ground truth, and so to really get to false positive and false negative, we need to do a lot of child observation in the classroom. So that's a sort of a methodological kind of concern in terms of trying to get to those numbers. But certainly we were very sensitive to that. Yeah. Yeah.
Really, really cool data set. I was just wondering if when you mentioned that 30% of the Really, really, really cool data set. I was just wondering, you mentioned that there were about 30% of the time where an intervention was taken, so that means 70% of time there wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering if there was a difference in heart rate going back to baseline when an intervention was taken versus not.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the data points that fit into our top strategies algorithm was the rate of change and the time to go back to baseline. That's sort of incorporated in what we suggest. I mean, what we've learned also is that, teachers are busy. They're not going to be taking data all day long. So we are limited by the fact that they could have been intervening. They could have seen it on their phone, known to intervene, but then not put data in that they intervened. So I think we're also learning that we need to do more like in-class observations. We did a little bit, but only an hour for each teacher, and I think we need to spend, more time with them there to see in the moment of how they're using it. Most of it was based on our report and interview with them at the end. But really good point. So yeah, we do need to better understand how to make it more available to them, so that they are really using that information that we're providing to them.
Yeah, my sister's an elementary ed teacher. I'm sure she would love this.
Yeah, my mom used to be a teacher, and she was like, "Hey, if we could have that."
I don't know if this one's on. Yeah. I was just wondering, as this goes forward and, down the road, who is going to be responsible for, paying for the device? Is it going to be the parents, or is it going to be provided by, the school district?
I would love for it to be school districts, so any parent would not need to pay. There are, unfortunately, some costs associated with just keeping an app maintained. Through the trial, part of the feasibility issues we had is just iOS who did an update, and then broke some of the functions that we had in there. So there's certainly some maintenance just that needs to be done. But I think we could certainly, provide it at cost, like a dollar download or something like that. We need to do all these pricing. I'm a experimental developmental psychologist, not really interested in building my own company. So I need to think through, long term, how we're going to make sure that this is sustained and available publicly. But I think partnering with school districts is a nice way to do it, but as we've learned and what we've been thinking about is we're probably not going to have this just for the school context, so we need to think, more generally speaking, are we working with clinics or maybe residential homes, or, where are we going to be trying to get this out. So a lot of thinking to be done and no, resolutions on all of that yet. Okay, thank you very much.